Hey, what's up everyone? My name's Derk, and today we're going to be talking about a rather kind of controversial subject. We're going to be talking about video game movies as well as addressing the Sonic movie, so stay tuned. So video game movies have always kind of been this point of controversy. They've had this kind of reputation that's really tied to them. There's like this kind of idea that there's never really been a good video game movie. Video game movies are instantly bad. They have, the odds are against them and all that sort of stuff. And, today I just really want to answer the question of why that is. A big part of that I think is just Hollywood sees this market of video games and they're like, hey, we want to profit off of that. We want to make a movie based on a popular IP. So today we're going to go through the history of video game movies and try to get down to the bottom of why they have this reputation. And answer the question, are they all bad? So the first movie we're going to be talking about is The Wizard. This is a movie about a boy and his brother who team up with a girl and travel across the country in order to compete in a video game tournament. So this is an example where you see Nintendo really trying to kind of create a product. They're creating this movie that follows this boy who's playing Nintendo games and all sorts of stuff. He's going to compete in the tournament, and it kind of creates a thing where they build up these physical products that Nintendo is selling. It builds up the video games. A really infamous part of it is there's this kind of meme where it's a kid with a power glove and he goes, "This is the power glove. It's so bad." In this really kind of 80s cheese, badass kind of way.
I love the power glove. It's so bad.
Obviously, it's a very dated film, but what we see with this is Nintendo, is telling a genuine story. They're making a movie, but we start to see that it kind of includes this promotion of these physical products. We're seeing Nintendo games being played. We're seeing the Power Glove. We're seeing all these different elements, and as they're going on their journey, it builds up hype and belief for video games, for Nintendo products. And he's competing in a video game tournament in the 1980s. This is before Twitch. This is some MLG shit. This kid is a pro. He wants to go to California, he wants to compete, and this is kind of the first instance where we start to see video games and products come together.
The Wizard.
Another example I think of when I think of video game movies really stems back to, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. So Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, they both had these TV series that were going on air at this time. Like each of them kind of created a movie around a similar time, and what they were doing was it was a promotion. So it was a feature, it was almost like a big epic episode of a TV show. And so they kind of made this really big event where you could go to theaters. It was a big deal. It was a movie for a TV show that you grew up watching. And I remember specifically when I went to see the Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie as a kid, it's one of those childhood memories that they would give out Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards.
And when you see Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie, you'll receive one of 4 special Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards you can't get anywhere else.
What they kind of did was they had you go see the movie, and then Yu-Gi is using these really cool, powerful cards, and then you can get one of them by going to see the movie and get the tickets. So, and there's people that would go back and they would see the movie multiple times trying to get all these cards because there are specific editions for, the movie, for the promotion. They're addressing an IP they already have. They have this TV show that's going on. They have people that watch it. They also have these card games. They're highly successful. And so it's almost kind of like this marriage between the two. People that are huge fans of the TV show, people that are huge fans of the card game are going to go see it, but then they're also promoting the physical product. They're promoting the card game. And so they're really thinking, how can we get the most out of our TV show, out of these products, all these sort of stuff, and they're trying to really build it up. And it's kind of like what we start to see with Pokemon really becoming a huge, massive entertainment corporation where they just have all these sort of different stems and ways to monetize. So this is kind of inklings of that where we see the TV show and the card games coming together. So let's tie it back a little bit. Let's talk about the Super Mario Brothers movie. So Super Mario Brothers movie is, to put it lightly, is not good. It's very bad. And there's quite a few different reasons for this. And if you guys have seen it, you would probably know just instantly by looking at it, just something's off. So we see people like Dennis Hopper playing Bowser, and this is a 1993 movie. So I think one of the big problems with this film, they try to provide explanations for everything in the video game. So they're like, oh, Goombas are essentially these evolutions, and they try to have this whole story where it's essentially, lizards survive the Big Bang, or dinosaurs survive the Big Bang, and they evolve and they look like people, but they can de-evolve, and it brings this whole evolution thing. And they really try to take this element of just explaining and rationalizing everything that you see in the video game. So, The Mario Brothers, they're plumbers, of course, but they're from Brooklyn, so they bring that kind of Brooklyn attitude. So, which is, you know, fine. I love New York, but it's just kind of funny to see this sort of, you know, they make them these real New Yorkers that are real plumbers that are having to go through this whole story, and they have this whole thing about, yeah, they try to tie, there's like this alternate lizard world that is happening that evolves kind of parallel to the human world, and for kids like that would see the movie at the time, it kind of loses them, and I think adults too. It's like, it's a very complicated plot for something that's so simplistic, and we just see certain parts of it where it's like really lame. Like they have this whole thing where they have the bomb. It's just this really big scene where it's this huge build-up, but it's this little tiny thing that's walking, and it's meant to feel dramatic. It's meant everyone's freaking out at it, but it's this little tiny thing, and it really just feels lame. It's really weird to make a Mario Brothers movie seem just strange, and you know, it does have that cheese, but not in a good way. You know, there's some very famous line readings from Dennis Hopper, as much as I love him as an actor. Monkey is a really big one.
Give me that Devo gun! Monkey!
So with this one, I think the main thing is that they just try to provide explanation that they don't need, and you start to lose your audience because it more so becomes the rationale behind the video games versus the movie. The movie becomes kind of washed away in this like sea of like explanation that's not needed. And talking about a different video game movie, we can kind of look at the Mortal Kombat movie from 1995. Now, cheesy is not bad, and I think this is something people enjoy. The Mortal Kombat movie, the dialogue is atrocious, it's awful.
Made a choice. This is our tournament, remember? Mortal Kombat. We fight it.
There's no denying that. It's super cheesy, it's super larger than life, but what it does is it kind of creates this feeling. You maintain the spirit of the video game series, because what they do is they take all these different characters and elements, but they really heighten it to this level. So it's not worried about this realism sense. It's not worried about having to address all these certain things. It's like, this is the world of Mortal Kombat. You know it, accept it. You know, it's a fighting world, and they really play into that element. So even though, yeah, it is a cheesy movie, it's not serious, but it becomes enjoyable because it really maintains the spirit of the games and just being this really larger than life thing. And so I think things like that, where they're not worried about the explanations, they're playing into they're having the characters have their time, but they're really just kind of trying to know what the audience is there for. They're focusing on the fighting and all that sort of stuff. They're not so worried about what Mario's last name is. Talking about another series that has its own larger than life feeling, I'm going to be talking about the Resident Evil series. So the movie series is very much a thing of its own. It's a series that's been going on for many years. It has many iterations and all that sort of stuff. And even though it kind of starts in the beginning, I would say more loyal to the source material, you start to see these creative liberties. And that's not a bad thing, because what they're really trying to do is they take this core spirit of what the games are, but then they kind of run away with it. And this is very much an extreme example, but I would say over the course of all these different Resident Evil movies, what you start to see is essentially people taking all these different characters and just creating their almost own world with it. So it became this thing where it goes from starting with the Resident Evil source material, and it builds into being its own film series that's very much its own thing. You know, it's not like the games at all. It becomes, you know, these own characters. They're going through these situations. It's focusing on the action and the sort of attitude of it. You know, something I really think of the Resident Evil movies, they have these big kind of action set pieces where, you know, they see, you know, they're loading quarters into shotgun shells and shooting zombies and all this sort of stuff. And it's very extreme, it's dramatic, it's cheesy, but it's kind of almost become this own thing. So that's kind of like a different example where we see not only is it its own thing, but it's almost moved away from the source material. You know, you don't have to be a fan of Resident Evil, you just watch the movies and you kind of understand zombies, all that sort of stuff. But it's grown to this point where it has this really in-depth story that's kind of run away. So, and it's clearly not good movies, but they're entertaining. So, you know, and really keep in mind that I'm approaching these video game movies about the entertainment. You're approaching these movies for very different things. You can think about them critically, but a lot of times you're really looking for different things. And I think the feeling is a big part of if a movie is successful or not for these video game movies. So we're going to be talking about another movie adaptation of video games. So I'm a huge fan of Max Payne. Max Payne is an excellent video game series. You know, it has 3 parts. So this movie is based around the first 2 because the third one is a much more recent iteration. But they did not do a good job with this film. First mistake is they hired Mark Wahlberg to play Max Payne. So first off, they're already going on the wrong foot. taking the wrong approach. But what we kind of start to see is Hollywood looking at this IP, this film, and looking at this video game series, and they're trying to do something with it, but they don't really fully understand what to do. And so we see that the tone, I would say the tone of this dark, gritty, vengeful cop is very accurate to like the films. You know, he's kind of full of dread, all this sort of stuff that we really see with Max Payne, which makes him a great character. That is present in the movie. What we start to see is that they take a lot of creative liberties and move past certain elements in the games and run away with it. And this is different from the Resident Evil series because it almost becomes a point where it alienates the audience that's the fan of the game. You know, the video game had these sort of segments where they were very trippy and scary and they told story and, you know, were haunting. And what the movie tries to do is it uses these CGI demons that appear to really kind of push this idea forward. But what it really does is it moves from being more about these hallucinations on Valkyrie to being more about these demons, and it distracts and it takes away from what people understood of the game. And you know, and when I was researching for this video, I was looking at, you know, clips for the Max Payne trailer, and a lot of these comments are people that are fans of the game that are actually confused. They're saying, I don't remember all this demon stuff being in the games. And yeah, there are the segments, that's what it's based on, but it really kind of moves past that. So I think they capture the grit. You know, there's some good scenes, there's some good action set pieces and all that sort of stuff, but what we start to fail to see is that it alienates fans of the game that enjoy the games. They don't really understand the intention of certain things. And instead of kind of letting the movie stand on its own and be its own thing, I felt like they felt the need to incorporate different elements in order to punch it up or bring it to a different way or just make it more quote unquote accessible. But by making it more accessible, they actually made it more alienating. It just loses sight of what makes it unique. You know, Max Payne is not a generic video game. It brought a lot of innovation to the table. And so, you know, they really had an opportunity to expand and build upon this, but what they did was they just put it in the wrong direction and just, you know, it alienated people. So that's kind of like an example of, you know, different from Resident Evil, because Resident Evil is very much still maintains that spirit. It's, even though it might have the tone correct, it starts to lose the spirit of the games and pushes people away. It becomes a lot more about these supernatural elements. It doesn't read the same. Next, we're going to be talking about Detective Pikachu. So Detective Pikachu is a 2019 film. You know, it is based on the core TV series, but it's also more so based rather loosely on the 2016 video game by the same name. So what they're basically doing is it's not a movie that's based upon, hey, it's Ash. It's these things that you know, core. Yeah, Pikachu, you know Pikachu, of course. Like, it's one of the biggest images. But instead of them relying on just the core TV show, they took this different story. And what they did was they expanded upon it. And so it's a very loose adaptation. So what you see is they take characters, but they're putting them in a new situation, a new direction. They're crafting this kind of very fresh new story. And you know, Detective Pikachu, in my opinion, is not like an amazing movie. I think it's a very entertaining movie, but there are a lot of script and structural issues with it. You know, there's a very formulaic kind of plot, and it just doesn't really sell itself to the maximum potential. But what we see, and it becomes very refreshing when we see characters in fresh situations. And it feels very fresh because what we see is they're taking characters that you may be familiar with and they're putting them in their own sort of thing. So it becomes very much this encapsulated film. While it might not be this perfect film, they're trying to do something very different. It's not that same kind of heavily beaten path. They're doing something different with it. So this kind of represents this sort of new direction we see with a lot of video game movies going. So Future Derk here, essentially I was editing the video and the Sonic portion went on for, let's just say, a little longer than I expected. So this is going to be the two parts. This video is just going to be focusing on video game movies. The next one's going to be a full-on Sonic review, so stay tuned for that. They're taking these kind of this new formula where they're essentially taking these IP, they're taking these characters and elements they may be familiar with, but they're crafting these fresh and new stories for them. It's different than, you know, trying to create a one-to-one, hey, we're just remaking a thing shot by shot visually. They're taking these risks by creating these new stories for these characters that are familiar. So they're blending the familiar with the unfamiliar, the fresh new story, and that's really refreshing to see. A lot of these other movies, a lot of their pitfalls are either they focus too heavily on trying to recreate. They're playing it safe. Or what they're doing is they're just taking, you know, using the IP as essentially a layer of paint for a more generic movie. So what we kind of see is this sort of different approach where you still feel the spirit of the IP that you like, you know, and even though these aren't the best executed movies, it starts to become this much better direction versus something where we start with like the Mario Brothers movie, where it's very much just a sort of, you'll see it for the name alone. And in the Mario movies, there are attempts to sort of convince people that, you know, they really understand the game. Read is false, because they're just providing these explanations. They're not really bringing anything new to the table. It's not authentic, versus these other movies. They're not good, but they're authentic, and you can tell that they cared. So those are my thoughts on the video game movies, about how they kind of changed over time, where we kind of have now, where these movies that are not good, but they feel more authentic. So if you liked it, please leave a like, comment below what movies you think I should talk about next, or subjects. And if you really loved it, please drop a subscription. I'm going to be creating more of these, so check it out. And, you know, check out my other video here that I did about uncut gems. And thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe, because I will be releasing the second part of this video, which is going to be the full Sonic review for the new Sonic movies. So stay tuned and check it out. Thanks, guys.